Hello, lovers of literature. So, as we always do is, we read poems, right? Today, let us break through from our usual cadence and let us get into dealing with a story by an American author who often regrets the fact if called as a writer who writes science fiction. So he decided to take up writing at the age of 12 or 13. He later said, let me quote him, that he made the decision in hopes of emulating his heroes and to live forever through his fiction. Here is author Ray Bradbury, was born on August 2nd, 1920, August 22nd, 1920 in Waukegan, Illinois, to Leonard Sprodling Bradbury, a lineman for power and telephone utilities. Bradbury enjoyed a relatively idyllic childhood in Waukegan, which he later incorporated into several semi-autobiographical novels, short stories. As a child, he was a huge fan of magicians and a voracious reader of adventure and fantasy fiction, especially by L. Frank Baum, Jules Verne, and Edgar Rice Burroughs. Ray Bradbury was an American fantasy and horror author who already have mentioned, rejected being categorized as a science fiction author, claiming that his work based on the fantastical and unreal. His best-known novel is Fahrenheit 451, which is a dystopian study of future American society in which critical thought is outlawed. He is also remembered for several other popular works, including the Martian Chronicles and Something Wicked This Way Comes. Bradbury won the Pulitzer Prize in 2007 and one of the most celebrated authors of the 21st century. He died in Los Angeles on June 5th, 2012 at the age of 91. So today we are going to read a story written by Mr. Bradbury. The story is titled as All Summer in a Day. The All Summer in a Day is a science fiction short story written by, of course I mentioned, the same author, and which was first published in the March 1954 issue of the magazine of fantasy and science fiction. The story is about a class of students on Venus, which in the story is a world of constant rainstorms, where the sun is only visible for 1 hour every 7 years. One of the children, Margot, moved to Venus from Earth 5 years earlier, and she is the only one who remembers sunshine, since the sun shines regularly on Earth. When the teacher asks them to write about the sun, here is, I think the sun is a flower that blooms for just 1 hour. She describes the sun as a penny or like a fire in the stove. The other children, being too young ever to have seen it themselves, do not believe her. Led by a boy named William, they bully and antagonize her. And just before the sun comes out, William rallies the other children and they lock her in a closet down a tunnel. As the sun is about to appear, the teacher arrives to take the class outside to enjoy their 2 hours of sunshine. And in their astonishment and joy, they all forgot about Margot. They run, play, skip, jump, prance about, savoring each second of their newly found freedom. Oh, it's better, Then the sun lamps, isn't it? One of them cries. Suddenly, a girl catches a raindrop in her hands. Thunder sounds, then lightning comes, and the children run back inside as the sun disappears and it starts to pour again. At this point, one of them remembers Margot, who is still locked in the closet. Ashamed, they let out her of the closet, standing frozen, embarrassed over what they have done and unable to meet each other's glances. The precious sun come and has gone. And because of their despicable act, Margot, who loved the sun the most, has missed it. So this is the story. It was also adapted as a 30-minute television adaptation, originally broadcast on the PBS children's series Wonderworks in 1982. The ending is expanded to show the children's atoning for their horrible, unforgivable acts by giving Margot flowers that they picked while the sun was out. The director of photography in that TV series was Robert Eswell, who went on to become an Academy Award-winning cinematographer. So all summer in a day is alluded to in a description of main character Oscar Rao from Junior Dez's The Brief Wondrous Life of Oscar Wilde in popular culture. So after having said everything about the story in a short synopsis, let us read the story. And let me tell you one thing. Okay, let me tell you after we read the story. Otherwise it will be a little dragging. Ready? Ready? Now? Soon? Do the scientists really know? Will it happen today? Will it? Which day are they referring to? They're of course referring to the day when the sun will be out. Look, look, see for yourself. The children pressed to each other like so many roses, so many weeds intermixed, peering out for a look at the hidden sun. So many roses, so many weeds, as if everyone is looking out for that hope, for that warmth. And what is that? The sun. The sun symbolizes the warmth, the care, the affection from the cold monotony of their hearts. It rained. It had been raining for 7 years. Thousands upon thousands of days compounded and filled from one end to the other with rain, with the drum and gush of water, with the sweet crystal fall of showers and the concussion of storms so heavy they were tidal waves come over the islands. So the rain seems to be their soul that is quite enveloped by ignorance, by lack of warmth. With the sweet crystal fall of showers and the concussion of storms so heavy, there were tidal waves come over the islands. 1,000 forests had been crushed under the rain and grown up 1,000 times to be crushed again. So creation was destroyed, recreated within the 7 years, without the children knowing how the real warmth was like. And this was the way life was forever on the planet Venus. And this was the schoolroom of the children of rocket men and women who had come to a reigning world to set up civilization and live out their lives. So their tiring times to come to this planet and to struggle with living. It's stopping. Yes. Margot stood apart from them. So this girl seems to be someone who knows everything, who is so away, who is so alienated, who is punished, who is tortured for knowing what they, the children in this planet Venus, did not know. So she stood apart from these children who could even remember a time when there wasn't rain and rain and rain. They were all 9 years old, and if there had been a day 7 years ago when the sun came out for an hour and showed its face to the stunned world, they could not recall. Sometimes at night she heard them stir in remembrance. She heard them stir in remembrance, and she knew they were dreaming and remembering gold or a yellow crayon or a coin large enough to buy the world with. So very touching lines full of visual imagery. This is what Margot describes about the sun. She knew they thought they remembered a warmness, like a blushing in the face. So as if the warmness is a long forgotten thing that they wanted to remember in their dreams, mind you. In the face, in the body, in the arms, legs, trembling hands. But then they always awoke to the tutting drum, the endless shaking down of clear bed necklaces up in the roof. Metaphor. Clear bed necklaces refers to the incessant raindrops. Up in the roof, the walk, the gardens, the forests, and the dreams were gone. All day yesterday they had read in class about the sun, about how like a lemon it was and how hot. And they had written small stories or essays or poems about it. I think the sun is a flower. Metaphor that blooms for just 1 hour. That was Margot's poem, read in a quiet voice in the still classroom while the rain was falling outside, as if no one even wanted to listen to Margot. Still classroom means, of course, the children had fallen silent to Margot's description. "Oh, you didn't write that," protested one of the boys. This is William, another character. "I did," said Margot, "I did." "William," said the teacher, "but that was yesterday." Now the rain was slackening, and the children were crushed in the great, thick windows. So as if they want to know the outer world, but they're crushed. They're not allowed to know. They're ignorant of the warmth of the sun. "Where's the teacher? She'll be back. She'd better hurry. We will miss it." What will they miss? The vision of the sun. They turned on themselves like a feverish wheel, all tumbling spokes. They were just wheeling. They were just trying to hold up that emotion. So this is, of course, a simile where everyone is going through that fever of knowing the ignorant sun. Margot stood alone. She was a very frail girl. Even a description shows that how she was even separated from everyone out there. She was the one who was subjected to being bullied by everyone else, though she was giving the correct account. She was a very frail girl who looked as if she had been lost in the rain for years, and the rain had washed the blue from her eyes and the red from her mouth and the yellow from her hair. So as if she was lost in this planet. She's so alienated, as if she feels that even though she knew the sun, she's lost amidst this rain. And everything of her memory has been washed away. All these is visual imagery. The blue from her eyes, the red from her mouth, and the yellow from her hair. All the color has been effaced away by the rain. She was an old photograph dusted from an album. Metaphor where she just remembers her past, and as if her past is an old photograph that seems to be full of dust, as if she cannot see into herself. Whitened away, and if she spoke at all, her voice would be a ghost. Why? Because she did not know herself, as if she was a phantom even to herself. Now she stood, separate, staring at the wren and the loud, wet world beyond the huge glass. So this glass is a kind of a screen that separates her from the entire world. "What are you looking at?" said William. Margot said nothing. "Speak when you are spoken to." Please answer when you are spoken to. It shows that Margot was showing disrespect to William, which William could not tolerate. He gave her a shove, but she did not move. Rather, she let herself be moved only by him. So they tried to corner her and tried to take her away. They edged away from her. They would not look at her. She felt them go away, and this was because she would play no games with them in the echoing tunnels of the underground city, because she never wanted to play the games of ignorance with them. And see these lines, echoing tunnels, as if the tunnels also echoed the same ignorance which they only felt, of the underground city that is buried, that is so filled with ignorance. If they tagged her and ran, she stood blinking after them and did not follow. So she never wanted to follow this ignorance. She always carried the fire of knowledge of the sun. When the class sang songs about happiness and life and games, her lips barely moved. She was the saddest girl living in this planet, knowing of everything, yet not being able to share the same, physically, mentally, emotionally. Only when they sang about the sun in summer did her lips move, as she watched the drenched windows. And then, of course, the biggest crime of all was that she had come here only 5 years ago from Earth. Why? What was the biggest crime? That she remembers what they do not remember. And she remembered the sun and the way the sun was and the sky was when she was 4 in Ohio. So she lived there. This was her place, actually her native place. And they had been on Venus all their lives. So they have been a subject to ignorance, to rain, to darkness, to bleakness, to grey atmosphere all throughout their life, which Margot was not. And they had been only 2 years old when the last sun came out. So of course they have no memory of that, and had long since forgotten the color and heat of it and the way it really was. But Margot remembered. So this is the twist in the story. "It's like a penny," she said once, eyes closed. So it's like a penny. It's like a coin size. "No, it's not," the children cried. "It's like a fire," she said, "in the stove." So she puts on similes after similes. "You are lying, you don't remember," cried the children. But she remembered and stood quietly apart from all of them and watched the patterning windows because of the raindrops. The world outside seems to be so unknown to Margot. And once a month ago, she had refused to shower in the school shower rooms, had clutched her hands to her ears and over her head, screaming the water mustn't touch her, as if the water seems to be so irrevocable, seems to be so unrelentlessly falling on and on and on and on. Screaming the water mustn't touch her head. So after that, dimly she sensed it. She was different, so very important line. And they knew her difference and kept away. So they already know that she was different. So they were prey to jealousy, envy. They were prey to these vices. And thus, they never shared the same place with Margot. They never wanted to be educated by Margot's education. They knew her difference and kept away. There was talk that her father and mother were taking her back to Earth next year. It seemed vital to her that they do so, though it would mean the loss of thousands of dollars to her family. And so the children hated her for all these reasons of big and little consequences. What is the big consequence? That she remembers everything? That she knows everything? And what is the little consequence? That she lived in this world where she never could adjust. They hated her pale snow face, her waiting silence. Why waiting silence? Because she was waiting for the sun to arrive. So this is a transferred epithet, mind you. Waiting silence. Her thinness and a possible future. What is this thinness? The thinness of seeing the sun once more. So as if the hope of seeing the sun was so thin. And a possible future. What was a possible future? That the sun will appear and she will very much see to the sun. Get away, the boy gave her another push. What are you waiting for? Then for the first time she turned and looked at him, a turn of defiance. And what she was waiting for was in her eyes. So she did not speak, but her eyes spoke for her. Oh well, don't wait around here, cried the boy savagely. You won't see nothing. You won't see nothing, double negative. See the line. It's double negative, trying to emphasize on the fact that whatever she is waiting for will never come. Her lips moved. Nothing, he cried. It was all of a joke, wasn't it? So they're trying to ridicule her belief. They're trying to tell her that it's a joke what you believe. What you believe is a sun, it's a joke. It's nowhere there. It never thrives, it will never come. Her lips moved. Nothing, he cried. It was all a joke, wasn't it? He turned to the other children. Nothing's happening today, is it? They all blinked at him and then, understanding, laughed and shook their heads. Nothing, nothing. Oh, but, Margot whispered, but the sun is going to appear. Her eyes helpless. She's trying to tell them, please believe. She's trying frantically to let them believe. But this is the day the scientists predict. They say, they know. The sun? All a joke, said the boy and seized her roughly. Hey, everyone, let's put her in a closet before the teacher comes. So they try to confine her so that she doesn't see what she has waited to see for so many years. Putting her in the closet also tries to tell us that how they were victims of their own vices. Putting her in the closet meant that they were still blind mentally in their souls. Though they could see the sun, but Margot, of not having seen the sun when they saw the sun, talks about the blindness that their soul was subjected to. They physically saw the sun with their eyes, but when they apologized and they were so shameful to stand before Margot, it shows that how the sun had opened up their eyes. We are going to come later. No, said Margot, falling back. They surged about her, caught her up and bore her, protesting and then pleading and then crying, back into a tunnel, a room, a closet, so dark place, but she would never be able to see the sun. They surged about her, caught her up. Sorry, I read these lines. Back into a tunnel, a room, a closet where they slammed and locked the door. They stood looking at the door and saw it tremble from her beating and throwing herself against it. She's trying frantically to get out of the darkness. They heard her muffled cries, then smiling. They turned and went out and back down the tunnel as the teacher arrived. Ready, children? She glanced at her watch. Yes, said everyone. Are we all here? Yes. The rain slacked still more. It's just reducing. They crowded to the huge door. The rain stopped finally. It was as if in the midst of a film concerning an avalanche, everything from here seems to be so dreamlike and filled with visual imageries, mind you. It's such a beautiful story with so much of enriched imageries. Oh my God. An avalanche, a tornado, a hurricane, a volcanic eruption, something had first gone wrong with the sound apparatus, thus muffling and finally cutting off all the noise, of the blasts and repercussions and thunders, and then, second, ripped the film from the projector and inserted in its place a beautiful tropical slide, which did not move or tremor. So there was no more of anything to the hindrances of seeing the sun. There were no more tremors, there were no more volcanic eruptions, there were no more avalanches, there were no more sounds. The world ground to a standstill. The silence of Margot and silence of this world seems to be running parallelly. It's the silence of knowing. The sound of ignorance is more than silence of knowing what really the warmth is. The world ground to a standstill. The silence was so immense, unbelievable, that you felt your ears had been stuffed or you had lost your hearing altogether. So it was so silent that everyone felt that they have lost their ears because they never knew what silence is. The children put their hands to their ears. They stood apart. Now you understand. They were just so in a hard. Now they just stood apart, just like Margot did. The door slid back and the smell of the silent, waiting world came into them. The world that was waiting to see the sun just came in. The sun came out. It was the color of a flaming bronze and it was very large, all metaphor. And the sky around it was a blazing blue tile color. Metaphor again. Visual imagery and metaphor goes hand in hand. And the jungle burned with sunlight as the children, released from their spell of ignorance, rushed out yelling into the springtime. So it's summer, it's spring, it's happiness. Now don't go too far, called the teacher after them. You have only 2 hours, you know. You wouldn't want to get caught out. But they were running and turning their faces up to the sky. They were feeling the heat. They were feeling the happiness of knowing the sun on their cheeks like a warm iron. They were taking off their jackets and letting the sun burn their arms. So they're feeling the sun altogether. Oh, it's better than the sun lamps, isn't it? Much, much better. So they have known not the real sun. They have known not the real knowledge of knowing. They stopped running and stood in the grey jungle that covered Venus, that grew and never stopped growing tumultuously, even as you watched it. It was a nest of octopi. Just imagine the visual imagery and the metaphor. The forest has been compared with the tentacles of an octopi, clustering up great arms of flesh-like weeds, as if the forest was just a cobweb of their ignorance, as if the sun never penetrated through the forest, as if it was just a cobweb of everything entangled, as if they never thought their own minds. Wavering, flowering in this brief spring. It was the color of rubber and ash, this jungle. From the many years without sun, so everything was so colorless. It was the color of stones and white cheeses, so the color seems to be so whitish and ink. And it was the color of the moon that is white. The children lay out laughing on the jungle mattresses and heard it sigh and squeak under them, resilient and alive. What was alive? The sun. What was so resilient? The sun. And they were just enjoying, they were living their summer, all summer in a day. They had only 2 hours and they were living their springtime, summertime in a day, mind you. They ran among the trees, they slipped and fell, they pushed each other, so they were playing, they were enjoying, they played hide and seek and tag. But most of all, they squinted at the sun until the tears ran down their faces. So they were looking at the sun as if they looked at the complete knowledge of this universe. They were bestowed with warmth. They put their hands up to that yellowness and that amazing blueness and the breath of the fresh air, and listened to the silence which suspended them in a blessed sea of no sound and no motion. Blessed sea of knowledge, where everything seemed to come to a standstill, metaphor. They looked at everything and savored everything, then wildly like animals escaped from their caves. They ran in shouting circles. They ran for an hour and did not stop running. Why were they running? They were mad. They were frantic at the test of love, life, warmth. And then, in the midst of their running, one of the girls wails. If you look into the story, there comes the climax and now comes the anticlimax, and this is more of an introspection onto their own self. The sun gave them the physical eyes, but what is more important, after the sun goes away, they get the eyes into their soul. And then in the midst of their running, one of the girls wailed. Everyone stopped. The girl standing in the open held out her hand. "Oh, look, she said, trembling. They came slowly to look at her opened palm. So there is a raindrop there. In the center of it, cupped and huge, was a single raindrop, just like a teardrop. She began to cry, looking at it. They glanced quietly at the sun. Oh. A few cold drops fell on their noses and their cheeks and their mouths. The sun faded behind a star of mist. So everything is enveloped. A wind blew cold around them. They turned and started to walk back toward the underground house. Their hands at their sides, their smiles vanishing away. A boom of thunder startled them, and like leaves before a new hurricane. They tumbled upon each other and ran. So they were so mad. They just tested the world of happiness. Now they're back into the same world, which seems to be a forgotten world, because they saw for themselves the real glory of sun, the warmth, the happiness, the exuberance of living life. Lighting stuck 10 miles away, 5 miles away, a mile, a half mile. The sky darkened into a midnight. Again, they're shrouded by ignorance. In a flash, they stood in the doorway of the underground for a moment to see how Ray Bradbury is such a brilliant author, how he makes us just not know what is coming next. It just comes in phases, the story. It's like the waves. Ignorance, knowledge, ignorance, again introspection. That's how the story goes. It goes in waves and waves and waves. It's never a flat line. They stood in a doorway of the underground for a moment until it was raining hard. Then they closed the door and heard the gigantic sound of the rain falling in torrents and avalanches everywhere and forever. So the rain seems to be their ultimate fate. Why? Because they are not yet tested the real knowledge. And now comes the introspection. Will it be 7 years more? Yes, 7. Then one of them gave a little cry. Margot, what? She's still in the closet? That means the person who has always tried to educate them on the sun had not seen the sun herself. How cruel they were. How merciless they were. Margot. They stood as if Someone had driven them like so many sticks into the floor. They looked at each other. They were so ashamed. Then looked away. They glanced out at the world that was raining now, and raining steadily. They could not meet each other's eyes. They were ashamed of themselves. They were overshadowed with their own vice. Their faces were solemn and pale. They looked at their hands and feet, their faces down. Before the sun, their faces were up because their heads were held high. Now what comes? Their faces down. They were ashamed. Margot, one of the girls, said, "Oh well, no one moved." "Go on," whispered the girl. They walked slowly down the hall in the sound of the cold rain. They turned through the doorway to the room in the sound of the storm and thunder, lightning on their faces, blue and terrible. Why this is terrible? Because they're terrible. They're ashamed of their own vices. That is terrible to them. How could they do this? They walked over to the closet door slowly and stood by it, behind the closet door. So someone was hiding as if, just let them enjoy everything. She was behind it. Was only silence. They unlocked the door even more slowly and let Margot out. So now they were so ashamed that the act was so slow and so introspective an act. And Margot was out to be a part of their world because they have tested for themselves what warmth, happiness, love, compassion, care is all about. Now, after we have dealt with the story, read the story, let us do a little more analytical study of the story. You know that Bradbury quickly establishes the extreme setting he will use as a backdrop for the nonetheless relatable drama in the story. The overwhelming rain on Venus had created a harsh, inhospitable environment, isn't it? Suggesting a sense of displacement from the natural world on Earth. Meanwhile, the anticipated arrival of the sun has generated a slightly chaotic sense of excitement among the children. Their anticipation has an age of anxiety to it, foreshadowing the conflict and disappointment of the day to come. So this is the figure of speech that the author uses, foreshadowing, just to let the readers be more introspective of what is coming in. So the themes is the power of nature, of course, nostalgia of Margot, discontent of the children, and anticipation of Margot, disappointment of Margot of not having been able to recount the sun, which seemed just a distant memory. So all children on Venus long intensely waited for the sun, but Margot is isolated from her vivid memories. Somewhat intentionally, the author does this. She holds herself apart, demonstrating the extent to which she is fixated by these memoirs. This also highlights her privilege. She has memories that the other children lack and covet, and sets up the jealousy of being separated from them. And she becomes the subject of being bullied by William and the other children. The other students speak on Margot in the ways that seem initially not to make much sense. In the scene, for example, Margot is simply anticipating a class activity, but William's actions are motivated not by Margot's actions. Margot has special knowledge of the sun that allows her to write poems like sun is like a flower, or it's like a penny. The children are jealous that Margot has such experiences and use her as a scapegoat for their own feelings of deprivation of not knowing the sun. Claiming that Margot is lying when she speaks about the sun is one way for William to gain power over her, and by extension, the imbalance in their situations. In this scene, we also see the power that the sun continues to hold for Margot. She romanticizes her memories of it and briefly comes out of her shell only when she is able to express her interest in the sun. Here we see that the anticipation for the sun has made the children anxious, chaotic. The extent to which they have built up this day has made it impossible for them to enjoy the moment without fearing what is going to happen next. We also see that life away from sun seems to have had a physical draining effect on Margot, because she remembers the sun that she had seen 5 years ago. Deprivation from the sun has made her a shadow of her former self, almost physically less than human, while it has also made the other children seemingly less civil. The sun has a power to make humans both physically and mentally stronger, while its lack has the opposite effect. Again, William tries to engage Margot in conflict, even though her behavior is inoffensive. This is another example of William venting his sense of jealousy and deprivation on Margot, showing that these feelings can be strong motivators of bullying. But also we see that Margot herself may have exacerbated her isolation. She makes no secret of the fact that she looks down on life on Venus, as if she tries to separate herself deliberately, emphasizing the privileged life she had on Earth, especially in Ohio. Another perspective on Margot's isolation here is that she continues to be obsessed by the memories of her past, which comes haunting to her like those photographs which has been submerged in dust. This shows the strong nostalgia, like the nostalgia that Margot experiences for the sun, can prevent those who experience it from finding happiness in the present. So she is so overshadowed by her past. While the other children attempt to discredit Margot's memories, it is because they are jealous of her experiences and frustrated by the circumstances over which they have no control. What do? They just confine Margot in a closet. We also learn that Margot is privileged not just because she remembers the sun, but also because her parents are wealthy enough that may be able to move the family back to the earth again, providing more fodder for the children's jealousy. So this could be another reason. 2 reasons. One, Margot has seen the sun and they were deprived. And another, she can again go back to earth and live a fuller life and not just a life in Venus, because her parents were at a better place. Margot closes herself off from others because her memories are so important to her that she would rather focus on them. In the scene of bullying, and the other children torment Margot by introducing a threat to the thing she cares most about, that is seeing the sun. The thought that the long-anticipated day won't come to pass is difficult to bear, showing how intense this anticipation is. Perhaps because the intensity of the setting, the scene of teasing quickly escalates to violent bullying. In a mob, the children exact their revenge on Margot's perceived privilege, depriving her of the very thing which they were deprived of for these many years. As the big moment arrives, the children feel overwhelmed that their waiting has come to a standstill, and that anticipation has culminated in a moment that seems to surpass their expectations. The sudden stillness, quietness, emphasizes how violent and intolerable Venus's usual weather is. For the first time, they realize that the experience of nature brings a sudden sense of peace from their chaotic self, which is also brought about by the symbol of rain. Rain seems to be chaotic, incessantly falling. The sun has an immediately pleasurable effect, seeming to physically revive the children. The long-anticipated moment is better than any that could have been imagined. But because of the teacher's warning, they know this brief moment will be fleeing away. The absence of sunlight had turned Venus into a tangled and inhospitable wasteland, just like the tentacles of an octopi, just as it seemed to have the children unruly and cruel. Now outside, they are joyful, energized, suggesting the power of sun to bring physical and mental health back. The very moment that the brief period ends, the children revert into deeper sadness of their past. In this abrupt transition, we see that the building high hopes and investing so much emotional importance in fleeting experiences can be harmful. Now that they have such a bright memory to compare to, the normal day-to-day conditions of life on Venus seems unbearable. A moment of intense happiness, that is what they always wanted, and now they have tested it and they want it badly back. The return to waiting brings with it renewed awareness of how painful drawn-out anticipation can be. Already the children seem transfixed by the brief memory of the sun, just as Margot is. It seems likely that they too will succumb to the kind of nostalgia that Margot experienced. So for the first time, they find a kind of touch with Margot. Perhaps because they now share this emotional understanding of Margot's painful nostalgia, they understand that whatever Margot told them, the magnitude of the colors and everything related to the sun makes them feel so guilty about themselves, because the girl who had always shared the experiences was left away from seeing the sun. After the sun goes away, their inner eyes has been brought about. They cannot look at themselves because they are filled with guilt, but they are filled with stillness. Bradbury does not show us the aftermath of this evidence, but it's clear that the day has ended in difficult feelings all around. The children, like Margot, are now armed with a powerful memory and, of course, shame. Why? Because they did not allow Margot to see the sun. A day that should have brought joy to all instead has brought a powerful sense of loss. What is the loss here? The loss of knowing the real warmth of it and not having been able to experience it in the days to come. So the themes that is treated in this story, of course, jealousy, bullying, isolation. Margot is a subject to jealousy, to being bullied, and she is always isolated because she stands apart. And then comes the power of nature, the overpowering of nature of sun, bringing so much of vitality, strength back to this world. Makes us wonder the capacity of sun. And the estrangement of nature, of not knowing sun, how it can change humanity both physically, emotionally, by draining people of color and vigor. Then comes nostalgia and discontent. Nostalgia, that is what Margot always carried, of being known to the real sun, but as if it has been dusted. It has not been dusted. Her memory has not been dusted with reality. So as if she is just away, a few miles away from what was and what is. And discontent of knowing the present, that is the sun, and how the present flits into past and you have no control over it. Discontent of not being able to capture the sun for hours and hours ever. So they're obsessed with memories, and of course there comes the sense of absence and comes the sense of loss. And next comes anticipation. The anticipation for the day, the waiting that will lead them to see the sun. Disappointment because the sun will linger only for 2 hours, and then after having enjoyed, they're disappointed with that sense of loss. because it is a demoralizing longing for warmth, for knowledge that only the sun can give to the children. So these are the basic themes of the story. So in a short, it is a story that tells us how a group of children ostracize and bullies a child who doesn't fit in their world. So Margot is that child. William is the one who tries to discredit Margot, saying that it never is what she thinks it to be. Just before the sun is yet to come, she is just put under the underground tunnel, the coin tunnel, the darkness, the closet, and everything related to it. And they become cruel, but after the sun goes away, they are filled with remorse, guilt, as if the inner eye is opened, and they feel so guilty about the fact that Margot could not see the sun. So the animosity that they felt towards Margot changed into a world where both Margot and they seemed to be having the same experience, the same kind of loss, nostalgia, discontent. So this is how the story ends, and it's such a beautiful story with such beautiful imagery. It's just all about visual imagery, moving from ignorance to knowledge, from knowledge to ignorance, going in waves and waves and waves. It's such a treat to read such a wonderful story. I hope you have enjoyed the story at the other end. And as I always say, please leave in your comments, your suggestions, and whatever queries you have in regards to the story, and also, mind you, your own interpretation. It feels so great when each person has their own interpretation. And that is what makes literature such a diversified subject, or we can see with our own eyes. So stay happy, stay blessed. Let us all shine with that light of knowledge, the light of warmth, care, apathy for each other. Stay tuned, stay happy. Thank you so much.